John Marston had exactly 3 things on his to-do list that night: crack open a cold beer, rewatch Die Hard for the 100th time, and ignore the fact that his knees hurt just from standing up too fast. Retirement wasn't glamorous, but it had its perks, namely, not having to wake up at the crack of dawn to be screamed at by some officer who didn't know his left from his right. He sighed, adjusting himself in his worn-out recliner. The leather had conformed perfectly to his shape over the years, molding into the throne of an aging warrior. The room was dim, illuminated only by the flickering glow of his television. Bruce Willis was mid-shootout, glass crunching underfoot, the kind of old-school action that put modern movies to shame. He reached for his beer, the cool condensation slipping under his fingers. And just as he took a sip, everything went white. Not just white blinding. A sudden, overwhelming brightness swallowed the room, as if someone had dropped a flashbang directly onto his coffee table. His first instinct was to roll, to reach for a weapon, but gravity betrayed him. His stomach lurched, as if he had just been yanked off the planet itself, an invisible force pulling him through an unseen tunnel. The light expanded, then imploded into darkness. Then silence. When his senses rebooted, the first thing he noticed was the cold. A sterile chill settled against his skin. The second thing was that his skin was bare, completely bare. John opened his eyes, grimacing against the harsh fluorescent lighting above. The ceiling was smooth and metallic, gleaming like the inside of an expensive toaster. He sat up and immediately noticed 2 things. 1, he was lying on some kind of metallic examination table. And 2, he was butt naked. Fantastic. He swung his legs over the edge of the table, taking stock of his surroundings. The room was clinically pristine, all smooth metal and soft humming machinery. No visible seams, no doors, just an expanse of futuristic sterility. The air smelled sharp, almost electric, like ozone before storm. And then he saw them. 3 figures stood across the room, humanoid in shape, but unmistakably not human. They were tall, easily 7 feet, covered in shimmering, iridescent skin that shifted colors like oil on water. Their heads were elongated, their black, lidless eyes wide and unblinking, their mouths thin and lipless, curled slightly downward as if permanently unimpressed. Each one wore sleek, form-fitting uniforms, glowing with alien symbols. John sighed, rubbing his face. Oh, for foo, what now? Really? Now. He gestured vaguely at his lack of clothing. You couldn't even give me a damn pair of pants first? The aliens flinched. Their large, glossy eyes darted between one another, then back at him. The tallest of the 3 took a step forward, its elongated fingers clasping behind its back. Human, it intoned, its voice metallic and hollow. You have been chosen. John snorted. Yeah? Well, you chose wrong, pal. The alien continued, unfazed. You are now property of the Rixian Dominion. You will comply. Uh-huh. John crossed his arms, doing his best to ignore the fact that he was still stark naked. Look, I don't know if you guys have done your homework, but humans? We're real bad at the whole comply thing. The 3 aliens exchanged glances. The one in the middle, presumably the leader, tilted its head. Our records indicate your species is adaptable. Yeah, John said. That means stubborn as hell. A pause. Then, the leader turned and gestured toward a nearby panel. The smooth metallic wall shimmered, revealing what looked like a console covered in pulsating glyphs. One of the other aliens approached and tapped a few glowing symbols. A low hum filled the room. John tensed as a mechanical arm descended from the ceiling, a small, blinking device attached to its end. He had enough military experience to recognize the setup. This was some kind of control mechanism, probably meant to subdue him. You will submit, the leader stated. The process is painless. John rolled his shoulders, testing his muscles. You know, you guys keep saying we'll like it's a guarantee. The mechanical arm shot forward. John moved faster. Decades of training kicked in before his mind fully caught up. He twisted to the side, letting the arm just miss his shoulder. The instant it passed him, he grabbed it with both hands and yanked, hard. The metallic limb groaned under the force, sparks flying as he twisted it with practiced efficiency. The entire contraption wrenched from its mount with a satisfying crunch. The aliens recoiled. John grinned. Oops. A siren wailed. Red lights flashed, bathing the room in a crimson glow. The leader raised one elongated arm, pressing its palm against a hidden panel on its wrist. A mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. Subject resistant. Initiating neurological compliance. The air shimmered. A pulse of unseen energy slammed into John's skull, except instead of pain, he felt nothing. No mind control. No forced compliance. Just an oddly pleasant tingling sensation. John blinked. Huh. The alien stiffened. That is unexpected. Yeah, tell me about it. John gave his temple a few experimental taps. So what was that supposed to do? Brainwash me? Make me start chanting, I obey like a damn zombie. The alien hesitated. It should have overridden your cognitive resistance. Well, guess what? John smirked. My ex-wife tried to do that for years. Didn't work for her either. The aliens clearly didn't know how to process this. The leader's fingers twitched in what John could only interpret as alien frustration. It gestured to its companions. Restrain him. The two flanking aliens advanced. John exhaled sharply, rolling his neck. All right, you want to do this the hard way? Fine by me. They lunged. John moved. A lifetime of combat training had wired his reflexes into something brutal and efficient. He sidestepped the first alien, ducking under its elongated arms, and drove his elbow into its side. The creature staggered, hissing in surprise. Before it could recover, he pivoted and grabbed its wrist, twisting it sharply. There was a sickening pop as the alien yelped. The second one came from behind. John spun and slammed his heel into its midsection. The impact sent it sprawling backward into the console, sending a cascade of alien symbols flickering across the controls. The leader took a step back, hands raised. Cease at once. John cracked his knuckles. Yeah? Or what? The leader hesitated, then quickly tapped something on its wrist panel. The walls shimmered again. A new doorway materialized behind it, and from within stepped a new figure. Bigger, bulkier, armed. This alien was different from the others. Its skin was darker, more armored, and its body was encased in heavy exoskeletal plating. A massive, crackling baton was clenched in its clawed hand, its edges sparking ominously. John appraised the new arrival. Oh good, he muttered. You brought in the bouncer. The armored alien stomped forward. Resistance is... John didn't let it finish. He surged forward before the creature could react, ducking under the first swing of the baton. The weapon crackled through the air where his head had been a split second prior. He drove his fist into the alien's gut. It barely flinched. The thing swung again. John twisted, narrowly avoiding another electrified strike. This wasn't going to be a one-hit takedown. He needed to get creative. His eyes flicked to the broken mechanical arm still lying on the floor. In a single fluid motion, he dove, snatching up the twisted piece of metal. As the alien swung again, he threw the jagged debris directly at its face. The makeshift projectile struck home. The alien reeled back with a guttural snarl. John didn't waste the opening. He charged, planting one foot against the console for leverage, and drove his knee into the thing's head. It crumpled. John exhaled, straightening. Damn, I still got it. The remaining alien stared. The leader seemed to realize belatedly that it had vastly underestimated its captive. John cracked his knuckles. Now, how about we renegotiate this whole enslavement thing? John stood over the crumpled body of the armored alien, exhaling sharply. His muscles ached, a familiar, welcome sensation. It had been years since he'd had a proper fight, and damn if he didn't miss it just a little. The two remaining Rixians had frozen, their sleek, color-shifting skin pulsing erratically in what he assumed was the alien equivalent of panic. They weren't fighters. They were bureaucrats, paper pushers in a galactic empire that had made the fatal mistake of thinking he was just another piece of cargo. He rolled his shoulders, his mind already running through the next few steps. He was on an alien ship unarmed, wearing nothing but the fine coating of sweat from his impromptu skirmish. His advantage was surprise. They still didn't know what a trained human was capable of. But that wouldn't last. The moment they realized he wasn't some primitive, he'd be facing more than a couple of skinny lab techs and their goon squad. The leader alien took a slow step back, fingers twitching toward its wrist panel. John didn't give it the chance. In 3 quick strides, he closed the distance and grabbed the creature's arm before it could trigger whatever alarm it was reaching for. He twisted, and the alien let out a sharp, warbling sound, somewhere between a scream and a modem dying. Its knee buckled as John wrenched its limb at an unnatural angle, forcing it to the floor. "Bad move," he muttered, then looked at the second alien. "You want to push a button too? Go ahead. See what happens." The second Rixian hesitated, its lidless black eyes flicking between John and its fallen superior. It trembled, but made no move to resist. Smart. John turned his attention back to the one pinned beneath him. "I'm going to need some answers. Where the hell am I?" The leader hissed something unintelligible, its voice garbled and distorted. John narrowed his eyes. Either they weren't speaking English, and some kind of translator tech was in play, or they just naturally sounded like a broken fax machine. "Try that again," he growled, twisting the alien's arm slightly. It let out another sharp sound, then finally relented. "You are aboard a Rixian Dominion transport vessel," it said, the words coming slow and stilted, as if forced through a machine. "You are en route to the market." Market. They hadn't just abducted him. They were planning to sell him. John's grip tightened. His entire life had been about service, serving his country, his team, even the damn civilians who had no idea what people like him did to keep them safe. He had survived wars, black ops missions that never made the history books, and an ex-wife who could chew through steel. And these aliens thought they could slap a price tag on him? His lip curled. "Well, bad news for you. This market's closed." In one fluid motion, he pivoted, shifting his weight and slamming the alien's head against the sleek metal floor. The impact sent a sharp crack through the sterile air, and the Rixian went limp. John rose, turning to the second one, who promptly collapsed to its knees with a defeated warble. "Smart choice," he muttered, then glanced around the room. He needed intel, weapons, and, most importantly, clothes. The last thing he wanted was to storm an alien ship buck naked like some kind of cosmic Tarzan. He moved to the console where the armor guard had crashed earlier. The interface was a mess of glowing glyphs and shifting light, utterly incomprehensible. He wasn't a hacker, but he was damn good at breaking things. With a quick scan of the room, he found a jagged piece of the dismantled mechanical arm from earlier. Good enough. He took the debris and jammed it into the console. Sparks flew. The ship's soft ambient hum faltered, flickering erratically. The remaining alien let out a sharp chirp of distress, but John ignored it. He twisted the metal deeper, watching as the glyphs on the panel distorted, some blinking out entirely. Then, the alarm started. A deep, resonant klaxon thundered through the corridors, followed by an eerie, automated voice. The language was alien, but the urgency in its tone was unmistakable. John smirked. "Now we're talking." He turned to his trembling hostage. "Where's the armory?" The Rixian made a choking sound, hesitating for a fraction too long. John stepped closer, radiating the kind of quiet, lethal energy that had once made insurgents reconsider their life choices. "Armory," he repeated, voice flat. The alien frantically gestured toward the far wall. John followed its movement, spotting a previously invisible seam in the metal. A door. Appreciate it. He raised his foot and delivered a solid kick to the Rixian's head, knocking it unconscious. He strode to the hidden door, running his fingers along the smooth surface. No handle, no visible access point. Probably locked magnetically. But if the ship was in alert mode, that meant security systems were compromised. He stepped back, took a deep breath, and drove his fist into the seam with all the force he could muster. Pain lanced up his arm, but the panel dented. Encouraging. 2 more strikes, and the mechanism inside gave a violent hiss, the door sliding open with a reluctant groan. Jackpot. Inside, sleek alien weapons lined the walls. Rifles with glowing blue barrels, compact sidearms that hummed ominously, and a set of armor that looked about his size. It wasn't exactly military issue, but it was better than going into battle dressed like a reluctant nudist. John grabbed the nearest suit, slipping into the segmented plating. It was lighter than expected, the material shifting to mold around his frame. The fit was snug but functional. He flexed his hands, feeling the gauntlets tighten slightly in response. Not bad. Next, weapons. He snatched a rifle, testing its weight. No trigger, just a smooth grip with a pulsing indentation where his fingers rested. He squeezed experimentally, and a bolt of crackling blue energy shot out, searing a deep scorch mark into the opposite wall. John grinned. Oh yeah, this'll do. Armed and dressed, he stepped back into the corridor, which was now bathed in flashing red lights. The ship's alarm system still blared, distant sounds of movement echoing through the halls. They were coming. Good. He was getting bored. He moved fast, navigating the sleek metallic corridors with practiced efficiency. The layout was alien, but the fundamentals of military architecture weren't. Main decks had central hubs, security sections were near the bridge, and escape pods, if they existed, were likely in the lower levels. Footsteps. Fast, rhythmic, closing in. He ducked behind a support beam, just as a squad of Rixian guards rounded the corner. These ones were fully armored, carrying weapons similar to his. Their elongated heads snapped toward the open armory, and one of them barked something in their garbled tongue. John didn't wait for them to figure things out. He stepped from cover and squeezed the rifle's grip. A searing bolt of energy shot forward, hitting the lead guard square in the chest. The alien dropped instantly, its armor crackling with residual electricity. The others reacted fast, snapping their weapons up to return fire. John dove, rolling across the smooth floor as a barrage of energy blasts shredded the space where he'd just been. He fired twice mid-roll, one bolt hitting an alien's leg, sending it sprawling. Another shot took out a section of the ceiling, sending a cascade of smoking debris onto the remaining guards. He was up before they could recover, sprinting down the corridor. He needed to move. He'd made enough noise to bring the whole damn ship down on him. A sudden burst of static crackled through unseen speakers, followed by a deep, guttural voice. Human, it boomed. You cannot escape. John skidded to a halt, pressing himself against a wall. The voice was different from the ones he'd heard before. Deeper. Commanding. Not a grunt or a scientist. This was someone in charge. You have demonstrated resilience, the voice continued. Unexpected, but futile. John grinned. Yeah, keep telling yourself that, buddy. There was a pause. Then a low, amused rumble. Very well. Let us see how long that bravado lasts. The speakers cut out. The alarm stopped. And then the ship shifted. Gravity lurched as the entire structure tilted violently. John stumbled, catching himself against the wall. A distant, mechanical groan reverberated through the metal. They were changing course. John clenched his jaw. He wasn't just escaping anymore. He was on a goddamn countdown. Fine. Let them come. He gripped his stolen rifle and kept moving. The ship lurched beneath John's feet, a sudden, stomach-churning shift that sent him staggering against the wall. Somewhere deep in the vessel's bowels, engines roared to life, their vibrations thrumming through the metallic corridors. He didn't need a translator to figure out what was happening. The Rixians weren't just rerouting, they were going to lock down the ship, and that meant he was running out of time. His boots pounded against the floor as he pushed forward, navigating the maze of sleek, featureless hallways. The stolen rifle in his hands hummed softly, its power core still warm from the last firefight. He had counted at least a dozen different security patrols hunting him, their footfalls reverberating through the ship. They were getting smarter, setting up choke points, moving in coordinated formations, but they were still thinking like an empire that had never fought anything more dangerous than bureaucratic inefficiency. John had spent his life in battlefields, moving through war zones where failure meant being wiped off the map. The Rixians? They weren't ready for him. A burst of static crackled overhead, followed by the same guttural voice from before. The commander. human. Your resistance is admirable but pointless. You have nowhere to run." John let out a breath, rolling his shoulders. "Yeah, I've heard that one before." He reached a junction and pressed himself against the wall, peering around the corner. A squad of armored Rixians had taken up position near a set of reinforced doors. The bridge. It had to be. There was no reason to station this many guards unless they were protecting something critical. His fingers tightened around the rifle. He could take them. But direct assaults weren't always the best option. He scanned the corridor, searching for something. Anything that could turn the fight in his favor. His eyes landed on a maintenance panel embedded in the wall, just a few meters ahead. A grin tugged at his lips. He moved fast, sprinting low, staying out of the guard's immediate line of sight. He reached the panel, yanked it open, and found a tangle of glowing conduits inside. Alien tech or not, every ship had fundamentals: power lines, cooling systems, emergency overrides. He didn't need to understand the system. He just needed to break it. John grabbed a fistful of wires and ripped. The ship screamed. A deep, resonating groan echoed through the structure as emergency protocols tripped. Lights flickered wildly. A burst of steam hissed from vents along the walls. The Rixians barely had time to react before the floor beneath them tilted. Artificial gravity destabilized, sending them sprawling. Weapons clattered as they scrambled for balance. John didn't give them time to recover. He surged forward, rifle raised. His first shot caught one guard in the chest, sending them sprawling. The second went down before it could reach its weapon. The remaining Rixians were scrambling, uncoordinated, their footing unstable. John moved with precision. He slammed an elbow into the closest one's throat, grabbed another by the wrist, and wrenched its weapon away before slamming it across the alien's helmet. The last guard had just started to rise when John delivered a brutal kick to its midsection, sending it crashing back down. The corridor was silent except for the hum of dying energy weapons and the ragged breaths of the fallen. John exhaled, stepping over the bodies as he approached the doors. They loomed tall, reinforced with thick plating. He raised the stolen rifle and aimed at the control panel. One shot. The console sparked, its glyphs flickering. The doors hissed, groaning as they unlocked. John stepped inside. The bridge was massive, an expanse of glowing displays and panoramic windows, revealing the vast sprawl of space beyond. Stars stretched endlessly, and in the distance, a fleet loomed. Dozens of massive Rixian warships. John swore under his breath. A figure stood at the central command station, clad in ornate armor, taller than the others, broader, with deep violet skin and piercing black eyes. The Rixian commander. The alien turned slowly, assessing him. "You are remarkably persistent," it said. John smirked. "Yeah, well, I'm a slow learner." The commander studied him, then gestured toward the looming fleet. "You see, even if you take this ship, you will be crushed. The Dominion is vast. You are nothing but a single human." John tilted his head, considering. "You ever hear about guerrilla warfare?" The commander's brow furrowed slightly. John grinned. "See, the thing about humans? We don't like being told what to do. And when you piss off one of us, you don't just get a fight. You get a damn movement." He took a step forward. "You think this is about me escaping? No. I'm taking this ship. And when I do, I'm making sure every single slave you've taken gets a message." The commander's expression darkened. "You are a fool." John leveled the rifle at the control console and fired. The console exploded, sparks flying in all directions. The entire ship shuddered. Warning sirens blared. The commander moved fast, drawing a blade from its side. John was faster. He dodged the first swipe, twisting to the side. The second came in high. He ducked, driving his fist into the commander's ribs. The alien staggered, but recovered quickly, swinging again. John caught its wrist and wrenched it sideways, twisting the blade free. He kicked the alien back and turned to the main console. There was one thing he needed to do. Broadcast. He slammed his palm onto the interface. The ship's communication systems flickered to life. He didn't know how many planets the Dominion had enslaved, how many species had been crushed under their rule. But he knew one thing. If they saw him, if they saw one man taking the fight to their captors, they'd know something the Rixians had never wanted them to believe, that the Dominion could be beaten. John leaned in, speaking directly into the feed. This is John Marston. And if you're hearing this, it means you've been living under someone else's boot for too damn long. The commander lunged. John ducked, driving an elbow into the alien's gut before slamming its head against the console. You've been told you can't fight back, that resistance is pointless. But that's a lie. He grabbed the fallen blade and drove it into the console, overloading the system. You can fight. You just needed a spark. So here it is. The entire ship shook. The fleet outside began to move, confused by the rogue signal. John turned back to the commander, breathing hard. You wanted to know what one human could do. He smirked. You're about to find out. The ship's engines roared, power surging wildly. Alarm screamed. The Rixian fleet was scrambling, uncertain. And then, in the distance, explosions. Other ships, slave ships, rising up. The revolution had begun. The ship trembled, alarms wailing like a dying beast. John stood amidst the chaos, gripping the edge of the console as the Rixian fleet scrambled outside the bridge's massive viewport. Bright flashes of energy flared in the void, explosions, weapons fire, the beginning of something that had never happened before in this part of the galaxy. An uprising. Across the expanse, ships that had once been nothing more than shackles in space now turned against their masters. Fires erupted along the hulls of the Dominion's slave transports, some breaking free, others tearing apart from the inside as their cargo rose up with stolen weapons and raw fury. It wasn't just a rebellion. It was the shattering of an empire's illusion of control. The galaxy had lived under the weight of Rixian oppression for centuries, and all it took was one man, one soldier who had simply refused to kneel, to remind them that submission was a choice. John watched the anarchy unfold, his heartbeat steady. This was exactly what he wanted. Not just escape, not just survival, something bigger. Something that would rip through the fear that had kept species under the Rixian boot. He had lit the match, and now the whole damn forest was burning. Behind him, the Rixian commander stirred, coughing as it pushed itself up from the console's shattered remains. Blood, dark, thick, almost tar-like, leaked from a gash along its temple, staining the pristine floor beneath. Its breath was labored, but the fury in its black, depthless eyes had not dimmed. You don't understand what you've done, it rasped, its voice strained but laced with venom. John turned, resting the butt of his stolen rifle against his shoulder. Oh, I understand just fine. He gestured toward the chaos unfolding outside the viewport. That's freedom. That's people realizing they don't have to take your shit anymore. The commander staggered to its feet, wiping its mouth with the back of its elongated hand. This will not end with you victorious. The Dominion's already dead. John cut him off, voice steady, almost casual. They just don't know it yet. A vibration rumbled beneath them, deeper than before. Something was shifting within the ship's structure. John frowned, glancing at the flickering control panels. Damage warnings flashed across the alien script, the ship's stabilizers blinking in erratic patterns. The commander's lips curled into something almost like a smile. You are too late. You have doomed yourself. John sighed. See, every time someone tells me that, I end up walking away just fine. The lights flickered. The distant explosions became sharper, closer. Then the ship lurched violently, metal screeching as gravity wrenched sideways. John slammed into the nearest console, gripping it as sparks rained from the ceiling. The Dominion wasn't going to let this ship fall into enemy hands. If they couldn't have it, no one could. John's eyes darted to the viewport. The Rixian fleet was repositioning, forming a blockade. Some of the enslaved ships had made it out, punching through the chaos in desperate escape. But others weren't so lucky. A massive battleship, a leviathan of blackened steel and violet-lit insignias, moved into view, its massive cannons charging with eerie pulses of energy. They were going to blow this entire ship to dust. John exhaled, pushing off the console. All right, guess we're improvising. The commander's eyes narrowed. There is no escape. John pulled his rifle up, aiming without hesitation. For me? Always. He fired. The blast struck the alien square in the chest, sending it staggering backward before it collapsed against the bridge floor, unmoving. He didn't have time to confirm the kill. He was already sprinting toward the nearest control panel, scanning the erratic readouts. He didn't need to know the language to understand the essentials. The ship was in critical failure, systems were locked, and the engine core was reaching meltdown. If he stayed, he'd die. If he ran, he had maybe minutes. He slammed his fist against the nearest terminal, searching for anything, an override, a manual release, something that would give him a way out. The screens flickered, displaying security pathways across the vessel. There, escape pods. A few decks down. He turned, bolting for the exit, just as another blast rocked the ship. The Dominion wasn't hesitating anymore. The bridge's viewport cracked along the edges, splintering like a frozen lake under pressure. If he didn't move now, it wouldn't matter where the escape pods were. He'd be nothing but space dust. He tore through the corridors, past flickering lights and burning debris. Some of the Rixian crew were still alive, staggering through the wreckage in dazed confusion. They weren't a threat anymore. He didn't waste bullets on the defeated. The ship groaned, a deep, guttural sound that sent a cold shiver down his spine. A bulkhead ahead started to seal, an automatic lockdown trying to contain the inevitable. He pushed harder, sprinting at full force, and dove beneath it just as it slammed shut behind him. The escape bay was in sight. The nearest pod had its hatch open, waiting, its sleek interior glowing with alien glyphs. John vaulted inside, slamming his palm against what he hoped was the launch control. A harsh hiss of depressurization filled the air. Then he was falling. For a brief, gut-churning moment, the world tumbled. The ship above receded, shrinking against the abyss of space. Then the blast came. The Dominion's final shot struck dead center. The Rixian flagship erupted in a violent cascade of fire and debris, breaking apart from the inside out. The shockwave hit his pod a second later, sending it into a spiraling freefall. John gritted his teeth, gripping the seat's edges as the pod spun wildly. The safety harness bit into his shoulders. The stars blurred. Then, finally, the system corrected itself. The pod's thrusters kicked in, stabilizing its descent. He exhaled, head pressing back against the seat. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the radio crackled. Repeat, unidentified vessel. This is Earth Defense Fleet Patrol Unit Vanguard requesting identification. John blinked, his brain catching up. The signal was human. He pressed the comm switch. Yeah, this is John Marston. Special Forces, retired. Requesting a goddamn drink. There was a pause. Then, sir, did you just come out of that explosion? John grinned. Yeah, and I brought a revolution with me. The comms erupted in overlapping chatter. More ships. Human ships. He could see them now, Earth's fleet, small but formidable, arriving like wolves drawn to the scent of weakness. Maybe the Dominion thought humanity wasn't worth considering before. That was about to change. John leaned back in his seat, watching as the remnants of the Rixian fleet scattered, their once mighty empire fracturing before his eyes. He smirked. Retirement was overrated anyway.